The night in Charleston felt unusually quiet, as if the city was holding its breath. Clouds drifted across the sky like dark armies preparing for battle, swallowing the moon until only a pale glow remained. Inside the Chambers family house, 17-year-old Eliza moved silently through the hallway, drawn by the tense murmur of voices behind the dining room door. She pressed her ear against the cool wood, her heart thudding loudly as she feared the men inside might hear it. Their whispers were sharp and angry, trembling with something dangerous. "If Lincoln becomes president, the South must break away," one man hissed, "even if it means war." Eliza's breath caught in her throat, and she stepped back, pulse racing. She didn't know much about politics, but she understood one thing. When grown men whisper about war in a closed room, the world outside is about to change. Inside, the chandelier flickered, casting unsteady shadows across the faces of 6 powerful plantation owners. Isaac Chambers sat at the head of the table, shoulders tense, as the men hurled their fears across the room. They spoke of losing land, influence, and slavery, the foundation of the Southern economy. "We stand to lose everything," Mr. Tillman growled, pointing a trembling hand toward Isaac. "The North doesn't understand our way of life." So I on our ham so I with him matters up with him with I am with him of us I with self slender with ants and I out some sides it's my slow what I sense. If they elect Lincoln, they strike at the heart of the South. We cannot accept him as president. Isaac kept his voice calm. But war isn't something we can control once it starts. War, Tillman spat, is better than submission. The candlelight quivered as if frightened. Outside the door, Eliza felt something inside her shift. She had never heard grown men speak with such certainty about something so terrible. It felt like the ground beneath her feet was cracking. Hundreds of miles north, Abraham Lincoln sat alone in a small room lit by a single oil lamp. Towers of letters surrounded him, pleas, prayers, threats. One envelope carried no name, only a short message scrawled in dark ink. "If you take office, blood will spill." Lincoln sighed deeply, rubbing his temples. The country was dividing faster than he could bridge it. Outside, peaceful snow blanketed the streets of Illinois. Inside, he was surrounded by storms made of ink and fear. November 6, 1860, arrived like a drumbeat. As news spread that Lincoln won the election, northern cities erupted in celebration. People cheered, bells rang, and torchlight parades filled the streets. But in Charleston, the response was very different. Eliza watched from her balcony as angry crowds flooded the city. Men burned Lincoln's effigy, shouting slogans that echoed off the narrow streets. "Lincoln is not our president. The South must rise. Secede now." The flames cast eerie shadows across the cheering faces. The air smelled of smoke mixed with fear, and Eliza clutched the balcony railing. For the first time in her life, she felt truly unsafe in her own city. As tensions grew, leaders from the southern states gathered in Montgomery, Alabama. Behind locked doors and thick curtains, they debated the unthinkable. Finally, Jefferson Davis placed a document on the tabula Declaration of a new nation. "The Confederate States of America," he said quietly. One by one, signatures scratched across the parchment. A nation divided itself with ink before it divided with blood. The Union was broken, but the Confederacy was fragile. No army, no navy, no treasury, only determination and pride. For many Southerners, that pride was worth more than any resource. In Virginia, schoolteacher Thomas Avery received a letter from his brother Samuel in Pennsylvania. His hands trembled as he read the words, "If war comes, we may not stand on the same side. I pray it never comes to that." Thomas felt cold, Brothers divided, families torn apart. It seemed impossible, yet inevitable. That night, he dreamed of fields turned red and cannons thundering across open skies. He woke drenched in sweat. April 12, 1861. The morning began before dawn. Silence hung heavy over Charleston Harbor, broken only by the distant crash of waves inside Fort Sumter. Union Major Robert Anderson stood rigid. He stared at the Confederate cannons pointed directly at him across the water. Smoke faintly curled from their muzzles. "Do you think they'll fire?" a young soldier whispered. Anderson didn't answer. The answer came in a burst of fire. A cannon roared across the water, lighting the sky in an orange flash. The ground trembled. More blasts followed. The Confederacy had fired the first shot. Explosions tore through the fort. Walls crumbled, debris flew, men scrambled in panic. Smoke swallowed everything. The long brewing silence shattered. War was no longer a whisper in closed rooms. It was real. Charleston watched from the shore, and for a horrifying moment, the city cheered. People rushed to the harbor, waving flags, shouting triumphantly as cannons lit the sky. Eliza stood frozen among the crowd, watching the smoke rise like a dark omen. The cheers around her sounded hollow. She felt an ache in her chest that she couldn't explain. "This isn't victory," she whispered to herself. "This is the beginning of something terrible." In Washington, Abraham Lincoln received the news with a heavy heart. The telegram trembled slightly in his hand. "Fort Sumter has fallen." He closed his eyes, not in defeat but in sorrow. There was no turning back now. He stood and addressed his cabinet with a steady voice that hid the heartbreak beneath. "Call for 75,000 volunteers. The Union must stand." Across the nation, church bells rang. Newspapers screamed the headlines. Young men rushed to enlist, some driven by patriotism, some by fear, some by naive excitement. Thomas Avery received his orders: report at once. Defend the Union. On the same day, his cousin in Georgia received a summons from the Confederate Army. A single family was split like the nation itself. Thomas packed his belongings slowly, each item feeling heavier than the last. His mother clutched his sleeve, tears filling her eyes. "Promise me you'll come home," she whispered. But Thomas couldn't promise. Deep down, he feared he might never see home again. Across the South, soldiers marched through the streets. Their uniforms were crisp, their faces young, their hearts uncertain. Some smiled with pride, others hid trembling fear behind forced laughter. The sound of drums echoed through Charleston, bouncing off buildings and disappearing into the salty air. Lisa watched the soldiers pass by her house, feeling a cold unease settle inside her. Something in the wind felt wrong, as if the world itself was warning her. Night fell across America like a curtain hiding the horrors to come. Union troops assembled around Washington, their campfires flickering like stars scattered across the earth. Confederate forces gathered across Virginia, sharpening bayonets, loading rifles, praying for strength. Thomas stood in his first Union camp, staring at an endless sea of tents glowing under lantern light. Far to the south, his cousin held tight to a Confederate flag, his face set with determination and fear. Neither knew that within weeks, they would march toward the same battlefield award Bull Run. Blood would stain the earth for the first time in the war. The spark had become fire, and the fire was only getting started. Next episode, Brothers at War, the first battle begins.